After 6 years of grueling shifts as a petroleum logistics engineer in Dubai, I walked up the driveway of the $600,000 home I purchased entirely for my mother. My sister's arrogant husband answered the door, smirked at my dusty traveling clothes, and casually said, "If you're here to clean, the maid is out back." The maid scrubbing the patio stones on her knees was my mother, but what he forgot was that my name was the only one on the deed. My name is Natalie Meyer. To understand how a suburban estate in Austin, Texas became the battleground for my family's ultimate downfall, you have to understand the silent sacrifices of my mother, Martha, and the opportunistic greed of my sister, Chloe, and her husband, Julian. Growing up, my mother worked 2 jobs as a hospital night shift custodian to raise Chloe and me after our father passed away. She wore faded clothes, skipped meals, and ruined her knees on concrete floors just to ensure we had food and books. I inherited her work ethic, while Chloe inherited an overwhelming sense of entitlement. 10 years ago, I earned a degree in chemical engineering and secured a high-paying contract managing offshore logistics for an energy consortium overseas. I spent 6 long years working in extreme climates, living frugally and saving every single dollar with one singular goal: to buy my mother a serene, luxurious home where she would never have to work another day in her life. 2 years prior to my return, I found the perfect property, a beautiful 4-bedroom modern stone home on a half-acre lot in an upscale neighborhood near Austin. I paid $600,000 in cash from my offshore savings account, keeping the property title, mortgage-free deed, and property tax accounts exclusively under my legal name. 'Cause I was still completing my overseas contract, I invited my mother to move in immediately. I set up an automated monthly allowance transfer of $3,000 directly into her bank account to cover utilities, groceries, and personal comfort. What I didn't know was that as soon as my mother moved in, my sister Chloe and her husband Julian saw an opportunity to live a lavish lifestyle without paying a cent. Julian was a failed stock promoter who spent his days wearing expensive designer clothes funded by credit card debt, while Chloe worked part-time as a boutique stylist. Claiming they were hit by hard financial times, they asked my mother if they could stay in the home's guest suite for a couple of weeks until they found a new apartment. Those 2 weeks quickly turned into 2 full years. Because my mother was soft-hearted and deeply protective of her children, she never told me the truth during our weekly video calls. Whenever we spoke, she would position her tablet camera to show only her smiling face, insisting everything was wonderful. In reality, Chloe and Julian had systematically taken over the entire house. They moved into the master suite, relegated my mother to a small windowless room near the garage, and commandeered her monthly $3,000 allowance to pay for their fine dining, imported wine, and sports car leases. Worst of all, they treated my mother like an unpaid servant. They made her wash their laundry, cook their meals, and clean the expansive estate while they entertained their wealthy friends. My contract in Dubai finally concluded in late October. Wanting to give my mother the ultimate surprise, I booked an early flight back to Texas without announcing my arrival. I landed at Austin Bergstrom International Airport on a warm Thursday afternoon. I rented a SUV, loaded my luggage, and drove straight to the property. My heart swelled with pride as I pulled up the long driveway, looking at the stone facade, landscaped lawn, and quiet luxury of the home I had bled for. I walked up the front porch, set my duffel bag down, and rang the doorbell. A few seconds later, the heavy iron-trimmed oak door swung open. Standing in the doorway was Julian, holding a glass of scotch, wearing a silk robe. He looked down his nose at me, taking in my plain jeans, simple cotton shirt, and tired post-flight appearance. Because we had only met briefly once 6 years ago, he didn't recognize me. "Can I help you?" Julian asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "We don't buy anything at the door." "I'm here to see Martha," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Julian let out a dry, dismissive laugh. "If you're here to clean the gutters or trim the hedges, the maid is out back scrubbing the patio stones. Make it quick, we have guests coming over at 7. Before I could speak, he slammed the heavy door right in my face. A cold, terrifying stillness settled inside me. My blood ran cold as his words echoed in my mind. "The maid is out back." I walked slowly around the side of the house toward the backyard. There, on the scorching stone patio under the afternoon sun, was my 62-year-old mother. She was wearing old, oversized rags, kneeling on the hard stone with a bucket of soapy water, scrubbing grease stains off the outdoor kitchen counters. Her hands were red, calloused, and trembling with exhaustion. "Mom!" called out, my voice cracking. My mother stopped her scrubbing, wiped sweat from her forehead with her forearm, and turned around. When her eyes met mine, the scrub brush slipped from her hand into the bucket. "Natalie," she gasped, bursting into tears as she tried to push herself up from the stone floor. "My baby, you're home." I ran across the patio and caught her in my arms, pulling her close. As I held her, I felt how thin her frame had become. I looked down at her bruised knees and worn clothes, a wave of profound fury rising from the depths of my soul. "Mom, what is happening here?" I demanded, gently lifting her face. "Why are you on your knees cleaning? Why did Julian call you the maid?" My mother looked down at the floor, tears streaming down her face as she admitted the truth. She revealed how Chloe and Julian had moved in, taken over the master suite, threatened to cut her off from her grandchildren if she complained, and forced her to hand over her monthly allowance cards. They had convinced her that because I was far away, she was a burden who needed to earn her keep. "They told me if I bothered you with this, you would sell the house and leave me with nothing," she sobbed softly. "I just wanted to keep the family together, Natalie." I wiped her tears, took the scrub brush from her hands, and threw it into the yard. "You are never kneeling again, Mom," I said, my voice dropping to an absolute icy calm. "This house is yours, and today the parasites are leaving." I walked my mother inside through the back patio doors. In the living room, Chloe was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through her phone while Julian poured himself another drink at the bar. When Chloe saw me, her face turned pale. "Natalie? What are you doing here? You said you weren't coming back until next month." Julian froze, holding his glass midair as he realized who I was. "Wait, you're the sister from Dubai?" "I am the owner of this estate," I corrected him, stepping into the center of the room. "And I just heard you call my mother the maid in the house I paid $600,000 cash to buy for her." Julian tried to regain his composure, adjusting his robe with a nervous laugh. "Look, Natalie, you're taking things out of context. It was just a joke. Your mom likes staying busy around the house. It gives her purpose." "Shut your mouth," I interrupted, pointing a finger directly at his chest. "You have 30 minutes to pack your personal clothes and get out of my house." Chloe jumped up from the couch, her face twisting in anger. "You can't just kick us out, Natalie. We've lived here for 2 years. This is our home. Mom let us stay here, so you have no legal right to kick us out on the spot." Julian smirked, stepping beside Chloe. "She's right. Texas property law protects established residents. You can't just throw us out without a formal 30-day eviction notice. So why don't you calm down, go check into a hotel, and we can discuss this like adults tomorrow." They thought they had me trapped in a legal web. They thought my long absence made me powerless against their manipulation. They were dead wrong. Instead of arguing, I looked at my watch. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. "You think you're tenants?" I said softly. "Let's see what the law says by 9 tonight." I took my mother by the hand, led her out to my SUV, loaded her few personal belongings from her tiny garage room, and drove away from the property. My first stop was a high-end residential hotel 5 miles away. I checked my mother into a luxury suite, ordered her a hot gourmet meal, and hired a private home care nurse to attend to her bruised knees and exhaustion. Once my mother was safe, comfortable, and resting, I went to work. During my 6 years abroad, I had retained a top-tier Austin corporate and real estate attorney, Harrison Vance, to manage my domestic assets. I called Harrison on his direct line, explaining the exact situation. Harrison laughed coldly through the speaker. "Natalie, Julian is relying on standard tenant protections, but he made a fatal error. Did they ever sign a lease agreement with you?" "Never," I replied. "I haven't signed a single document giving them tenancy." "Did they ever pay rent directly to your asset management account?" Harrison asked. Not a single dollar, I confirmed. I paid all property taxes, homeowner association fees, insurance, and utilities directly from my corporate bank account. Then, under Texas law, they are not legal tenants. They are unauthorized guests who converted corporate funds and committed elder financial abuse, Harrison explained. Since the deed is solely in your name, you have total legal authority to modify property access, terminate utility contracts under your name, and issue an immediate notice of criminal trespass. By 6 o'clock that evening, Harrison had filed an emergency injunction and drafted a formal notice to vacate based on elder exploitation. 7 o'clock, I hired a mobile locksmith service, a team of private security contractors, and requested an off-duty police escort to oversee a property security audit. At 8:45 p.m., 3 vehicles pulled up to the driveway of my estate. Inside the house, lights were bright, music was playing, and Julian and Chloe were hosting a dinner party for 6 of their local socialite friends, boasting about how they had handled the property owner. 9 o'clock sharp, my locksmith went to work on the front door, rear doors, and garage access locks. Within 15 minutes, every single lock on the $600,000 estate had been replaced with heavy-duty commercial smart locks. The front door unlocked, and I stepped into the foyer accompanied by 2 private security guards and a uniformed police officer. Julian, Chloe, and their shocked dinner guests rushed into the hallway, holding wine glasses. "What is the meaning of this?" Julian screamed, his face turning red. "You broke into my house. Officer, arrest this woman. She's trespassing." The police officer stepped forward, pulling out an official property registry document provided by my attorney. "Sir, this property is owned 100% by Ms. Natalie Meyer," the officer stated firmly. "There are no recorded leases, no rent receipts, and no legal tenancy agreements on file for you or your wife. You are currently unauthorized occupants on private property." Chloe stepped forward, her voice rising in hysterics. "We live here. Our clothes are in the master bedroom. You can't just throw us out at night." "Actually, I can," I said, stepping forward and handing them 2 legal documents prepared by Harrison Vance. "Document number 1, I announced clearly, is a formal notice of criminal trespass. If either of you steps foot on this half-acre lot after 9:30 tonight, you will be arrested instantly." Julian opened the second document, his hands beginning to shake violently as his eyes scanned the page. "Document number 2, I continued, is an asset freeze and demand for accounting. Over the past 24 months, you illegally intercepted and converted $72,000 of allowance funds intended exclusively for my mother, while forcing her under duress to perform uncompensated domestic labor. My legal team is filing formal charges for elder financial exploitation and civil fraud first thing tomorrow morning." Julian's dinner guests began whispering in utter shock, putting down their drinks, grabbing their coats, and quietly slinking out the front door, desperate to avoid being associated with the scandal. "Natalie, please," Chloe cried out, falling to her knees in tears. "We're family. You can't leave us on the street with nowhere to go. You called our mother the maid and made her scrub floors while you slept in her master bedroom," I said, my voice stone cold. "You ceased being my family the moment you treated her like a servant." The security guard stepped in, supervising Julian and Chloe as they were given exactly 20 minutes to pack 2 suitcases each with basic personal clothing. Everything else, their designer bags bought with stolen funds, their luxury furniture, and their electronics, was locked inside the estate pending our civil asset audit. Precisely 9:30 p.m., Julian and Chloe were escorted off the property by the police officer, dragging their suitcases down the driveway in the dark, weeping and fighting with each other as the heavy iron gate slammed shut behind them. I stood on the front porch, watching their shadows disappear down the street, feeling a profound sense of justice wash over me. The legal fallout over the next 6 months was absolute and unyielding. Harrison Vance presented the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services with bank records showing how Julian had diverted my mother's allowance transfers into his personal trading accounts. Faced with overwhelming financial evidence and criminal charges of elder fraud, Julian surrendered his luxury vehicle, liquidated his remaining stock assets, and paid full restitution of $72,000 back into my mother's private trust account. The scandal destroyed Julian's reputation in Austin's financial circles. Unable to secure high-paying clients, his consulting business collapsed. Chloe was forced to take on 2 low-paying retail jobs to pay for a tiny, run-down one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. Meanwhile, I moved my mother back into her $600,000 home, fully redecorated to her exact taste. I hired a full-time housekeeper and gardener so my mother would never have to lift a finger again. 6 months later, on a beautiful sunny morning, I sat on the back patio with my mother. The stone counters were spotless, the garden was blooming with white roses, and my mother sat in a plush armchair, sipping fresh tea while reading her favorite book, a warm, peaceful smile on her face. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with gentle tears, and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Natalie. You gave me my dignity back." Standing beside her under the clear Texas sky, I knew that every single hour I spent working in those harsh desert oil fields had been worth it. True wealth isn't measured by expensive homes or luxury robes. It is found in protecting the people who sacrificed everything for you, enforcing justice against those who exploit the vulnerable, and ensuring that honor, love, and respect always prevail. Educational lesson: this scenario highlights key legal distinctions regarding property ownership, tenancy rights, and elder protection laws. Guests versus legal tenants. Under real estate law, living in a home without a signed lease, rent payments, or owner consent does not automatically grant legal tenancy rights. Unauthorized occupants who do not pay rent can be issued immediate notices of criminal trespass by the sole deed holder. Elder financial exploitation. Misappropriating funds, pensions, or personal allowances assigned to an elderly relative constitutes criminal elder abuse and financial conversion. State protective agencies and civil courts can enforce immediate asset clawbacks and order full restitution. Deed supremacy in property disputes. Sole property ownership on a registered deed grants the owner absolute legal authority over access, lock modifications, and utility management, voiding informal verbal promises made by unauthorized third parties. Personal advice: if you discover that opportunistic relatives are taking advantage of an elderly parent or exploiting property you own, act immediately using formal legal channels. Never allow emotional manipulation or false claims of family loyalty to excuse financial exploitation or physical mistreatment. Protect your assets with clear legal documentation, maintain direct control over property deeds, and enforce strict boundaries to preserve the safety, comfort, and dignity of those who raised you.